Hey, what's up, you guys? So, I'm back in 2013 with a podcast. So, today I've got some of the better players at our locals, like Mason,
Mm-hmm.
Justin,
Hi.
and Tim.
Uh,
Alright, so today we're going to be talking about basically looking back and moving forward with the game. And this podcast will be divided into 4 parts, and one part will come out every week. So, it's like you have stuff to look forward to. Part 1 will be the top tier of September 2012. If Mermails made a splash, if windups are really the best deck of the format, if there's a power circle, things like that. Part 2, the tier 2 decks. Part 3, the ban list. And part 4, the upcoming sets. So, let's talk about the top tier of September 2012. First of all, did Mermails make the splash that they were supposed to? I've gotten some mixed opinions on this. I mean, like, I've heard a lot of things like they didn't really make the impact everyone thought they did, but they have performed really well at events. So, I mean, like, what's the take on this? Is it a threat or is it just passive, you know? What do you guys think?
I think it's a threat, but I mean, it's like a counterable threat, and they were like the hype made them out to be like they were going to be like the be all end all when they came out, but to tell you the truth, they really weren't. I mean, they're really good. Don't get me wrong, but they're very countable.
Right, yeah, I found that the deck has, it's not like without its bad like sides. I mean, I know it's a lot of like dead draws and things like that, but it's got a really aggressive style, and that helps it win a lot of game ones. I've noticed. So, I mean, in that sense, it kind of feels like what a top tier deck should be. But like Tim, Justin, what are you guys' takes on that?
Well, they don't suck. They definitely did make an immediate showing pretty much at every single major tournament since they came out. And from what I gather, they're still making they're at least having somewhat of a noticeable presence in the OCG as well as the TCG. But I don't know. I think like Mason covered it. It's a counterable threat. It's in a way, very minimal way. It's kind of like you could say Inzektors were last format where they're actually quite easy to side against, but game ones are usually pretty tough unless of course you're the type of deck that can easily take advantage of Abyss Dweller.
Right, yeah, Biswiller definitely seems to be like a key counter card, although I don't think that it's a card for every deck. And
Like a main deck macro.
yeah,
Yeah, main deck macro and goes so Mermails don't exactly have like the best matchups against say windups, for example, just because of how easy it is for us to drop things that they can't deal with.
yeah, Tim, I mean, being another wind-up player, like, what do you think, like, of Mermails as a threat? And
The threat part of Mermails is their ability to search every card in their deck. Um, Dragoons is very powerful, and I'm not really sure what to say right here, but
I mean, like, do you think that they made the splash that they were supposed to make, or?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I mean, like, now, what would you guys say that it's like a deck that's sort of tied with windups? I mean, I personally don't think that it is. I feel like windups are a superior deck because they have more solid matchups, but and they aren't as easy to side against. But like Mermails, a lot of the pro players have latched onto the deck. Like, why do you guys think that they took to Mermails instead of playing windups or Rabbit?
Mermails play practically any tech card in the game right now.
I don't know. I haven't really like. I mean, I haven't really seen a lot of text in the deck. Like, I mean, what do you mean?
You can play a skill drain. You can take it through a synchro route. You can combo through any diva, can grab any pretty much water monster. Like
I guess
there-
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
The deck has security. It's like you like any other. If it was any other deck, you wouldn't think twice unless you thought that was a Starlight Road. You wouldn't think twice about heavying them or MSTing their stuff. But they have a built-in security system to where you really don't want you want to save everything until they activate it. So you're at a disadvantage by just waiting to sit there and just they choose how you play. You don't choose how they play.
Yeah, it definitely does command the game. I noticed that when I play them, like Mystical Space Typhoon becomes a lot harder to use because like you have to sit there and hold it in your hand, then you don't see the Abyss Sphere like turn out their turn, and so you start to get worried, and it's like, okay, so should I just go ahead and like MST or go ahead and heavy? But then like you can't, and so it's like I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. It's really it's true. It kind of does set the pace. I mean,
Windups are still better than they are, though, in my opinion.
yeah, and windups also happen to be our next topic. A lot of people have just outright said that windups are the best deck of the format. I agree, but do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Justin, how about you?
I agree within reason. It's pretty safe to say that they are definitely one of the best decks of the format, but it's honestly their actual success has been fairly limited, and I don't know. I'm not seeing windups. You obviously you see them everywhere. You see them everywhere, but how many actual YCS wins versus tops have they got in this format compared to everything else? And
They're beating the top.
are they complete? I mean, they're not unbeatable. There's too much. There's a lot of things out there that are capable of beating them. This isn't like
they're the deck to beat, so everybody's trying to gear their decks toward them. That's why their success is being faltered.
Yeah, I feel like that might be like something. I mean, I don't find windups to be like the most susceptible deck to side decking. Like, I mean, because I don't know. I mean, like mermails are definitely easier to side against, but
Yeah,
like, what were we saying?
there's no true fire way to like hit the deck. Because game 2 and 3, you're either staring down 3 MSTs or 3 MSTs and some dust tornadoes.
Right. Yeah. In game two, like they're always, on both sides, there are always going to be more MSTs and more dust flying around, and so it like goes in matches. I've seen goes in match get flipped and then just get MST'd, and it's just like is it really like a great card against them? And Max C is good against the deck too, but
As long as you have it out in your deck.
But yeah, if you don't have an out, then it's not really going to
Max C,
help you.
You better hope you draw into an out. Like if you just run Max C, you're doing it. I mean, there's no reason to be Max C.
Just like how there are situations where like I notice windups can just kind of stop when they see a Max C and still be fine because all of the builds today run like 10 traps. So I mean, there are always things like Mirror Force and Bottomless and Torrential there, and like it's just really easy to handle everything just with stuff like that. I mean, I would give it the title of best deck. I don't know.
It's the best deck in the right hands.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely not easy to play. I mean, I don't think anyone can say windups are just a pick up and play thing. There are a lot of things that I know you have to like remember for the deck.
This is one thing I can say that I've actually sat down and said, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah, that happens way too frequently where I get put in a situation where I have a field setup and I just don't know where to go next with it. I mean, all the good wind-up players obviously have practiced all the obvious combos and even some of the less obvious combos, but sometimes the deck throws situations at you that you have to think, where can I go from here, and can I go somewhere that will seemingly bring me to victory from here? And most of the time, yeah, you can. It's almost plant-like in a way, how some of the situations the deck sets up can lead you to.
Like just like you're saying, like plants and windups, like they're so similar. It's crazy. It's just you swap out the exceeds with the synchro. Like those two decks are those decks where you just have to, once you get your setup, you have to work on your feet from there. You have to adapt to the board and what your opponent's playing at that point, and just go from there.
Right. I mean, I definitely think that also windups compared to other decks, like they have the most solid matchups all around. Like there aren't really any. I don't think that there's a negative matchup right now for windups. I think that like their worst matchups are even. I mean, maybe there are people who'd probably disagree, but I mean, I think that like most of their matchups are even at worst. Now compared to the simpler deck like Dino Rabbit / Macro Rabbit, a lot of people said that Macro Rabbit's really only around because it's a counter to Mermails, and if Mermails weren't around, that Macro Rabbit would be near obsolete as a deck. What are your thoughts on that, like you guys?
I don't know. I just don't.
I wouldn't say obsolete because I mean it's built in having free wins like into it.
That's definitely true. I mean, like sometimes Lagia 2-3 back row or something like a Valor in hand can win.
The Mermails, but it can also be It can also be disruptive to other decks too. I mean, like if you flip a macro in like against windups, it's not that good. But just to think, it kind of shuts down the rat play. Like, the rat play isn't the way you win the game, but it hinders the speed of the deck, and it lets you do other things easier.
And the macro does hurt one of the best plays that windups have, which is the floating rabbit.
Yeah.
Actually, that's kind of being moved away from in the ability for us to go Magician Rat.
Yeah.
So, would you guys say then that is there still a power circle, quote unquote, in this top tier? Like, I've noticed that, I mean, a lot of times our top tiers kind of end up being a power circle, and last format was a perfect example. Does that still exist right now? Like, is there a circle of decks that sort of cancel each other out, or is it just sort of?
I think this format, it's like there's tier 2 decks that do really well, and then there's the tier 1 decks that do better than them. And the tier 1 decks, they're like they're like a linear line that they do okay against each other. It's just I don't think it's a power circle. I don't think a power circle exists at this point.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I feel like because whereas last format you kind of had a circle of this deck beats this deck, but is beaten by this deck. I don't feel that that's quite there anymore because, again, I think that windups have a positive matchup against Mermails, and against Dino Rabbit, I feel like it's even to positive because of how sometimes Dino Rabbit doesn't really draw the hands that it needs to deal with windups as consistently as windups draw the hands that it needs to just deal with Rabbit, if that makes like any amount of sense. I think the tier 2 does factor in, but a straight line sounds like a good analogy. I mean, Tim, Justin.
Pretty much what Mason said was pretty spot on.
Yeah, like
it's Mermail, then Rabbit, then Windup in that order.
Justin, how about you? I mean, do you like agree that it's just kind of like a sort
There's
of a
really, you could say it's kind of a line, but the matchups that most of the decks have against each other aren't significant enough to really say that there's a definite circle of power at all. Or I guess you could say the line is valid, but it really, I don't know. I'm starting to feel it's almost kind of starting to be a dice roll format in a way because I don't know.
The dice roll.
It's like skill and luck.
The difference in power between these decks is so low at the moment that really there's you can't just straight up. I mean, you can look at it and say yes, this has X above the other decks, but I don't know. I have my doubts about saying that any of them is distinctly the best deck in the format.
I think the skill and the luck is taking more into account than the actual matchup, like the matchup differences. But the matchup differences used to mean a lot more than they do now. But it's like whoever draws the best hand and whoever's more skillful wins the game, compared to what's better against what right now.
Yeah, I have noticed a trend like that. Especially, it really shows when a player simply doesn't know how to play their deck. Seems to like be a big influence compared to like matchups, because whereas last format it didn't take a genius to beat Inzektors with Dino Rabbit or something like that, but now like a wind-up player, I mean like the matchups in wind-up's favor, but you still got to know, I would say.
And knowing is half the battle.
Yep.
So, finally, what are some of the standout meta calls, like just kind of some of the biggest ones you guys have noticed? I'm pretty sure I know one of the first ones that should get spewed out here.
Macro Cosmos.
Yeah, macro. What about Thunder King? I mean, you guys, like, I've heard some people hate it to the point of like.
I think like Thunder King quit being a meta call at the beginning of the format and became like a staple.
Yeah, every deck is running 2 to 3 at the least.
Even macro,
pretty much.
like, they don't even want to attribute it. They just like use it for its effect.
Yeah, I have noticed that it's almost become like you run 2 or you run 3, and it's like it's not even worth citing sometimes. So, in that sense, it's sort of a meta call, sort of a semi-staple. We've noticed a decrease in cards like Valor. What do you guys like think of, why that might be? Valor and Max C not quite seeing as much play.
I see it as a natural progression of actual like players just getting more knowledge of hand traps. It won't fix all your problems.
Yeah, Mason, how about you? I mean, like the hand trap situation. The hand traps in general are somewhat decreasing in noise. I mean,
It's just I think that the card like there's better cards to be putting in your deck than hand traps right now. Hand traps, they like to slow down the game, but like right now the game it's progressed to a point where they're almost negatives. I would say. I mean, it's like I would rather run a third copy of Lance than a Valor sometimes. It's like there's better cards up to be playing right now.
right? Yeah,
And hand traps are fairly linear in what they do, and on top of that, they don't really take care of the problem.
yeah. That was
Valor,
the
for
point I was
example,
gonna
it
say.
stuns, but it doesn't get the monster off the
It's
field.
like
Whereas
the only
like,
hand trap that solves a problem is like a neg 2, a neg 1, and it's
The Herald,
Herald of the
yeah.
Orange Light. It's like the only one that takes care of a problem.
Yeah, and I feel like that's
It's
kind of.
deck specific.
I feel like that's kind of why like Phoenix Chain has even started to see a little bit more play here and there.
That
You
and
know-
the combination of macro.
Yeah,
And Skill Breaker in a week and a half.
and things like Compulse D Prison are like as a combination, like it just deals with more problems, I think, than a lot of these hand traps do, and so maybe that's just sort of the reason why they've fallen. Like Lance has seen a bit of a roller coaster ride in popularity. I'm seeing it sort of come back now. I mean, not entirely sure there. Like, what have you
It
guys
proved
noticed?
itself to be like a ridiculous tech card.
People are
Sometimes.
aware that Lance fixes a lot of problems that decks can't really deal with because we're getting bigger monsters, and Bottomless and Torrential are practically always going to be run at 2 in every deck right now. And Lance just keeps you alive.
I've also, in my opinion, kind of started to notice that Lance is. It's like not like I know a lot of people say like Lance can more or less replace MST. I found that the biggest advantage I have with Lance is, yes, that it like kind of does MST's job of getting rid of the spell trap, but it also doesn't make you have to like fear MSTing the wrong thing, and you don't like. Whereas if there were 3 card set, you wouldn't necessarily want to blind MST, but if you have Lance, you can go ahead and make your play. It doesn't matter what they do. I mean, because you have the Lance, and if they're warninged, then they're warning. But I feel safer with Lance sometimes than I do with an MST, where I have to decide what to hit. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just me.
that and Lance has additional versatility because with the damage step lances, you can get over monsters or have it work with them attacking you. So I think people, as far as techs are concerned, are starting to look more towards versatility as opposed to, I don't know, just slowing down the game state.
So that should round up the first part of our podcast. Tune in with us next week when we talk about the validity of some tier 2 decks like the Rise and Fall of Geargia, Inzektors, Agents, and then where did Dark World, Chaos Dragons, Sams, and Heroes go? So remember, thumbs up, and look forward to the next episode of this podcast next Friday.